She appeared out of the storm, soaked silent and without a name. A single dad and his daughter took her in, never imagining how much their lives were about to change. What began as an act of kindness would lead to revelations no one could predict. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey of healing courage and unexpected connection, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories that stay with you long after they end. Now let's begin. Single dad rescued a girl from a storm. The news called her the billionaire heiress, lost in 2004. The storm hit without mercy. It roared through the Oregon pines like a runaway train, ripping branches from trees and battering Jack Monroe's aging red pickup as it crawled along the icy two-lane road. Snow flew sideways in furious swirls, erasing everything ahead of the headlights. Jack leaned forward, white-knuckling the steering wheel. This wasn't just a snowstorm, it was a whiteout. In the passenger seat, 9-year-old Gracie clutched a thermos of cocoa to her chest. Her cheeks were pink from the heater and nerves. "Daddy," she said, her voice small, "are we going to make it home?" Jack glanced at her and softened. "Course we are, Bug. Just a few more miles." But then she gasped, pointing to the side of the road. Look, a blur of white against white. At first, Jack thought it was a snowdrift. But no. In the flicker of his high beams, he caught the unmistakable outline of a figure slumped under the broken railing of the old mill bridge. He hit the brakes. The truck skidded tires, sliding across packed snow before coming to a jarring stop just shy of the frozen ditch. "Stay here," Jack said already, throwing his door open. Wind slapped him across the face like a sheet of ice. He ran, boots crunching hard on the snow until he reached her. She was crumpled in a half-fetal position, drenched, shivering violently, her hair matted to her face. Thin fabric clung to her skin, soaked through. Her hands were scraped raw, fingernails chipped, and her eyes, when they fluttered open, were dazed and wild, as if she were halfway between this world and the next. "Hey, hey, can you hear me?" Jack asked, kneeling beside her. "You're okay. I've got you." Her lips parted, a hoarse whisper. "Don't let them find me?" And then she collapsed. He carried her to the truck, heart racing. Gracie shifted aside, eyes wide. "Is she dead?" "No, but she's freezing. Grab those blankets from the back." Jack wrapped the woman up, blasted the heater, and took off down the road with one eye on her pale face. She clutched something to her chest, a silver locket strung around her neck, gleaming faintly in the dashlights. Back home, the house was humble but warm. A one-story fixer-upper Jack had been mending for years, with a fireplace that always smoked a little too much and a cat that hated strangers. He laid the girl on the couch, peeled off her wet clothes, and dressed her in one of his flannel shirts. Gracie hovered nearby, silent and solemn like a nurse in training. Jack knelt beside the fire and lit it. The flames caught slowly, casting flickers of gold across the girl's face. Her lips were turning back to pink. Her breathing steadied. Gracie stepped forward with a mug of warm tea. "She's pretty," she whispered, "like someone from a movie." Jack smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said, "she kind of is." Hours passed. The storm quieted. Snow kept falling, but now it blanketed the world gently, like someone tucking in a child. Jack sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the local news on TV while Gracie dozed by the fire. He didn't expect anything interesting, just school closings, storm updates. But then the anchor's voice sharpened. "A cold case reemerges. Authorities confirm a new tip has surfaced regarding Emily Hallberg, the billionaire heiress who vanished after a tragic fire in 2004. A photo released today shows what the child might look like as an adult." Jack froze. The screen flashed a digital, age-progressed portrait, early 20s, light brown hair, delicate features, solemn eyes. He looked toward the couch. The woman was stirring, murmuring in her sleep, and she looked exactly like that image. He stood slowly, heart pounding, and approached her. She blinked up at him, confused. Where am I?" "You're safe," Jack said gently. "You passed out. We brought you home." "I don't remember." Her voice broke off, fragile as glass. "I don't know who I am." Jack sat beside her, careful not to scare her. "You don't remember your name?" She shook her head slowly. Her hands trembled. "It's just nothing. Just snow. Running. And voices shouting." Gracie peeked over from her blanket nest. "Can we call her Ellie?" she asked shyly. The woman turned to her, and for the briefest second she smiled. It was faint, crooked, but it reached her eyes. "I like that," she whispered. "Ellie." Jack made her tea and sat across from her, studying her face. "Ellie, do you remember anything? A hometown, a friend's name?" She shook her head again, visibly ashamed, but she clutched the locket. "May I?" Jack asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He gently opened it. Inside was a photo, a little girl in pigtails, maybe 5, and a woman with soft blonde curls. Both were smiling, caught in a moment that felt impossibly distant. On the other side was a faint engraving, "To my darling E.H. Love, Mom." Jack's stomach turned. It couldn't be a coincidence. Could it? He didn't want to overwhelm her, not yet. But something deep in his gut told him this girl on his couch was more than a drifter caught in a storm. She was the eye of a much older one that had been building for 20 years. And if she really was Emily Hallberg, then she had been running from something far darker than snow. The next morning broke in a hush of snowfall, the kind of soft, silencing white that seemed to hold its breath. Pine Hollow had turned to glass, icy roads, frozen rooftops, a world suspended in cold. Jack stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the world drip with winter, the steam from his mug curling into the chill. Behind him, the soft rustle of movement broke the quiet. He turned. Ellie had woken. She sat on the couch, wrapped in one of his old fleece blankets, her knees drawn to her chest. Her eyes wandered cautiously around the room, fireplace photos on the wall, Gracie's drawings taped to the fridge, but there was no recognition in her gaze. Just that quiet ache of someone who didn't know where they belonged. Jack set his coffee down and approached. "You slept most of the night." "That's a good thing." She nodded, tentative. "Thank you for bringing me in. You and your daughter." "You don't have to thank me," Jack said. "We do what we can." He handed her a bowl of oatmeal. She accepted it with hands still shaking slightly. "I keep trying to remember. I close my eyes and it's just blank. Or worse, bits and pieces. A hallway. Fire. A woman screaming. Then nothing." Jack sat down across from her. "That sounds like trauma blocking your memory. Happens more often than people think." Ellie stared into her bowl as if answers might float up from the oats. "Do you think I did something bad? Is that why I can't remember?" "No." His answer came too fast, too firm. He softened. "People who've done something bad don't usually run barefoot through snow in the middle of a storm." Her eyes welled unexpectedly. She blinked fast. "I don't know why I'm crying." Jack reached across the table and gently rested his hand near hers, not touching, just present. "Because you're human. And scared. And tired." A beat passed. Then she whispered, "What if no one's looking for me?" He didn't answer, because the possibility clawed at him too. Gracie padded into the kitchen in her socked feet, hair tousled. She yawned, blinked at Ellie, then shuffled over and plopped down beside her. "Do you want to see the snowman I made last year?" she asked. Ellie blinked. "I sure." Gracie grabbed a photo from the fridge and handed it over. It showed a lopsided snowman with gummy bear buttons and a hat far too big. Ellie stared at it like it was an artifact from another world. "I like snow," Gracie declared. "It makes things quiet." Ellie smiled, and it startled even her. "It does." Later that day, Jack took Gracie outside to shovel the walkway. He kept glancing back at the window where Ellie sat curled on the couch with the photo album Gracie had insisted she look through. Something about the way Ellie held herself, it wasn't just amnesia. It was fragility that came from long-term fear. That evening, Jack made soup and toasted bread. As they sat at the table, Ellie asked, "What's your story?" Jack looked at her a little surprised. "Me," he said. "Not much to tell. I was a contractor. Lost my wife to breast cancer 5 years ago. Been raising Gracie on my own ever since. Took whatever work came my way." Ellie stirred her soup absently. "That's not much. That's a life." Jack smiled faintly. "It's a quiet one, which honestly I prefer." She looked at him. Really looked. "I don't know what I preferred. I don't know who I was before this." He hesitated. "Do you want me to call the sheriff? See if anyone's reported you missing?" Ellie flinched. "Not yet, please. Just let me stay a few days until I can remember something. Anything." Jack studied her the way her eyes pleaded not from entitlement, but fear. Fear of being sent away too soon. "All right," he said. "A few days." She exhaled as if he'd handed her oxygen. That night she had the dream again. She was running barefoot across tile, the echo of footsteps behind her, a staircase grand sweeping, a man's voice shouting something, the smell of gasoline, then flames, always the flames, and a hand over her mouth. Ellie jolted awake in the dark, sweat chilling her spine. Her breath came in short gasps. She gripped the locket around her neck. She couldn't sleep again. So she tiptoed to the living room, where the fire had burned low to embers. She curled into the armchair and stared at the flames until they blurred. When morning came, Jack found her there. "You okay?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She shook her head, eyes hollow. "I keep dreaming about a house. It's huge. Marble floors. Spiral staircase. Someone was chasing me. Someone was burning it down." Jack hesitated. Then he showed her the news clipping he'd printed from the local station. It was the same story he'd seen the night before. Emily Halberg, the girl who vanished in 2004 after a fire destroyed her parents' mansion in Seattle. Body never found. No confirmed sightings. Ellie stared at the photo, a digitally aged version of a girl with solemn eyes and a soft, uncertain smile. "Do you recognize her?" Jack asked gently. She didn't answer, but she couldn't stop staring. Her hand drifted to her locket. She turned it over. Jack leaned closer. On the back, almost too faint to read, was an engraving, "To my darling E.H. Love, Mom." The bowl in her lap slid off her knees and shattered on the floor. "I think that's me," she whispered. And Jack, heart tightening, said nothing, because in his gut he already knew. The world outside remained frozen, but inside Jack Monroe's house, something had begun to thaw. Ellie stood by the window in the flannel shirt Jack had lent her, staring out at the field behind the house. Frost clung to the tall grass like glass dust. The sky was pale and endless, and for a fleeting moment she felt the strangest sense of déjà vu, as if she'd stood in this exact posture at another window years ago. Jack watched her from the kitchen, arms crossed. He'd made pancakes badly, he admitted, but Gracie had devoured them like they were gourmet. Ellie, on the other hand, hadn't touched hers. She held the plate like it might shatter in her hands. "You slept at all last night?" Jack asked gently. "Some." She turned to face him. "That picture of the girl on the news. Of me, if it's really me." She hesitated. "I think I need to know." Jack nodded slowly. "There's a way to find out." He reached into the drawer and pulled out a small envelope. "I did something this morning while you were still asleep. I ordered a DNA test kit. Just spit into a tube, mail it in. They compare your DNA to the Halberg family record that's part of the public file now." Ellie took the envelope in her hands and held it like it was something radioactive. "And if it's true, if I really am Emily Halberg, then why don't I remember any of it?" Jack didn't answer right away. Sometimes the brain buries things so deep we can't find them until we're ready. It's not failure, it's protection. She looked down at the envelope. "I don't know if I'm ready." "Then wait. You're safe here." Ellie nodded, but her eyes drifted to the window again. Outside, Gracie was bundled in her snow gear, building something in the yard, a crooked snow angel maybe, or just rolling in circles like kids do. Jack followed her gaze. "She likes you, you know." Ellie smiled, the smallest curve of her lips. "She saved me more than she knows." That afternoon, Jack had a roofing job out at one of the old homesteads near the tree line. Against his better judgment, he brought Ellie along mostly because she asked. "I need air," she said, "and maybe something will come back to me." She rode up front with him, eyes scanning the landscape. Jack kept an eye on her hands, tight on the wheel. The house they arrived at was barely standing, a relic from the 1940s, weather-beaten and sagging in the middle like a tired man's back. Jack handed her a thermos and got to work on the ladder. Ellie wandered the property. Something about the way the wind moved through the broken fence, the way the trees loomed like sentinels, it stirred something in her. A memory not yet whole. She moved around to the back of the house and stopped cold. There it was, the back porch with its cracked stone steps, the rusted swing dangling from one chain, the cellar doors hanging slightly ajar. Her knees buckled. She dropped to the snow. Jack saw her from the roof and scrambled down. "Ellie!" She was trembling. pointing. That door. I've seen that door. I've been in that house. Jack knelt beside her, heart thudding. Are you sure? Tears welled in her eyes. There was a room in the basement. Cold. Damp. No windows. A mattress on the floor. I think I was locked in there. Jack looked at the cellar door now, with a different kind of dread. You think this is where you were kept? I don't know. Her voice cracked. It's not clear, but something inside me. It just knew. My body remembered before my mind could. Jack exhaled slowly. He pulled her close, held her like a man trying to hold together something delicate and breaking. I believe you. That evening after Gracie had gone to bed, Jack made tea and sat with Ellie by the fire. She held the warm mug in her hands like it grounded her. I don't want to be Emily Hallberg, she said suddenly. Jack looked over. I know it sounds crazy, she continued, but if I really was her, why didn't anyone find me? Why didn't someone come looking? He didn't have an answer. I mean, how does a child just vanish from a mansion? From a family with money power? All the resources? Her voice trembled. If they didn't find me, maybe they didn't want to. Jack's jaw tightened. Maybe the person who was supposed to protect you was the one you needed protecting from. Ellie's breath hitched. What if it was someone I trusted? You're safe now, he said, firm and quiet. Whatever happened, whoever failed you, it ends here. She looked at him, and in the flicker of firelight, her eyes were no longer just haunted. They were searching for something real, solid. For the first time, she whispered, I feel like I'm not just floating through the world. You're not, Jack said. You're here. You matter. Even if you never remember a thing, Ellie matters. She laughed softly through her tears. You really are a mechanic with a poet's soul. Jack grinned. Don't tell the guys at the shop. Later that night, long after the house had gone quiet, Ellie sat alone at the kitchen table. The DNA test kit was open beside her. The locket lay on the table, the photo turned outward. She stared at it for a long time. Then slowly she picked up the vial and spit into it. She sealed the envelope with trembling hands and wrote her name, Ellie Possible Hallberg, on the label. Then she whispered, not to anyone in the room, but to the child inside her who had been lost for far too long, I'm ready to remember. The snow melted slowly over the following week, revealing a landscape of browns and grays beneath the frost. Pine Hollow resumed its sleepy rhythm. School buses returned to the roads. Smoke drifted steadily from chimneys, and Jack's phone began to ring again, with repair requests from neighbors whose roofs had buckled under the storm's weight. But inside Jack's modest home time moved differently. It moved cautiously. Ellie had grown quieter since the memory at the old house. She wandered through the house like someone half awake, haunted by shadows she couldn't fully name. Some mornings she woke with tears she didn't understand. Other nights she stood motionless in the hallway, staring at the floor like something terrible had happened there. Jack noticed it all, but he didn't push. He knew healing couldn't be rushed. Instead, he gave her space. He brought her tea in the mornings and offered tools when she followed him to job sites. He let her hammer nails beside him, climb ladders, learn the work that anchored him. And slowly, between boards and shingles, between laughter with Gracie and quiet cups of coffee, a different kind of memory began to grow, not of the past, but of belonging. It was on one of those days as Ellie stood beside Jack on a roof overlooking the tree-lined road that she saw it. A narrow house tucked behind a curtain of dead oaks. Peeling white paint. Shattered second-floor window. Something in her chest clutched. That house, she whispered. I've seen it before. Jack followed her gaze. You sure? Ellie swallowed. There's a staircase inside, wood curved, a big oil painting at the landing, a red rug with a gold border. I saw it in a dream. Jack didn't hesitate. Come on. They drove down the unmarked path until the tires crunched to a stop. The house loomed in silence, abandoned. The air felt heavier here. Ellie stepped forward, her boots crackling across frozen leaves. The front door opened with a reluctant groan. Inside, dust coated everything. The light filtering through broken slats painted stripes across a floor, scattered with old furniture and mildew-stained boxes. But Ellie wasn't looking at the clutter. She was staring at the staircase. It's real, she breathed. Jack watched her climb slowly, one hand grazing the railing. At the top, she paused. The wall before her was bare, but she reached up, fingers trembling, and touched a faint rectangle in the dust where a painting once hung. It was here, she said. A woman in white. She was holding a child. Jack stepped closer. You remember her, Noelle whispered. But I think she watched me every day, like a warning or a promise. She moved down the hallway toward a door on the right. Her hand hovered over the knob. I was in here. Jack nodded. Then let's open it together. They stepped into the room. It was small, a single bed frame, faded wallpaper peeling at the corners, a cracked mirror on the floor. Ellie walked to the center of the room and knelt. I used to count the floorboards, she said, to pass time. 1, 2, 3. I'd stop at 21. She looked up at Jack, eyes full of storm and stillness. Who locks up a child in a room like this? Jack's voice was low. Someone who wanted her forgotten. They left in silence. Back at home, Ellie sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea she didn't drink. Gracie climbed into her lap without asking. Ellie froze for a moment, then melted, wrapping her arms around the child like a lifeline. I didn't have a Gracie, she murmured almost to herself. When I was little, I think I was alone. Jack leaned in the doorway watching them. Not anymore. Ellie looked up at him. What if I'm not just a missing girl, Jack? What if the reason I was taken wasn't random? Jack crossed the room and pulled out a chair. Go on. I keep remembering things that don't make sense. A man's voice, always calm, like he was used to being obeyed. And a door with a keypad. Not just a house, something bigger. A place with money, secrecy. Jack frowned. You think it was someone close to your family? I think it was someone who worked for them, who knew their routines, who knew when I was alone. Jack's jaw tightened. That narrows it down. Ellie looked at him, her voice barely audible. What if they think I'm still gone? What if they find out I'm alive? Jack didn't answer right away. He reached across the table, covering her hands with his. Then they'll have to go through me. That night, long after Gracie had gone to bed, Jack stepped outside to call an old contact, a retired detective named Ray Turlow, who once helped him settle a neighbor's false insurance claim. Ray had worked in Seattle in the early 2000s. He might remember the Hallberg case. The line clicked. Turlow here. Ray, it's Jack Monroe. I need to ask you something about a cold case. A girl, Emily Hallberg. There was a long pause. Why would you be asking about that? Jack exhaled. Because I think she's alive, and she's sitting in my house. Another pause. Then where are you, Pine Hollow? Ray's voice dropped. Don't tell anyone else. Not yet. That case was dirty, Jack. Real dirty. And if you've got her, you better believe someone else is going to want her back. For all the wrong reasons. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the win. Understood, he said. Just tell me what you remember. Ray sighed. What I remember is this. The official report said accident. Gas line, faulty wiring, some tragic fire. But there were whispers, embezzlement, hidden trusts, offshore accounts. Her parents were ready to expose someone. And then boom, dead. Girl gone. No ransom. No body. Jack swallowed hard. She's scared, he said. And remembering more every day. Then you better keep her close, Jack. Because if what you've got is really Emily Hallberg, she's not just a girl with no past, she's a key. And keys open doors most people never want unlocked. When Jack stepped back inside, he found Ellie at the table, the silver locket resting beside the now-mailed DNA envelope. She looked up, tired but resolute. I think I want to remember, she said, even if it hurts. Jack nodded quietly, pulling out the chair beside her. Then we'll face it together, he said. Whatever's buried, we'll dig it up. Ellie didn't smile, but she didn't flinch either. For the first time, she sat still. Ready. Snow had stopped falling, but in Ellie's mind it hadn't. The storm raged behind her eyes each time she closed them, blinding, relentless, pulling her backward into memories that flickered like candlelight, refusing to settle into full flame. She sat in Jack's truck, hands folded tightly in her lap, staring out the window at the sleepy stretch of Pine Hollow's main street. It was a Thursday, but you wouldn't know it. The bakery was closed early. A few cars rolled lazily by. It was the kind of town where time could disappear, where people assumed danger only happened on the news. But not for her. Not anymore. Inside the Pine Hollow Library, the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. Jack had suggested this trip thinking perhaps old headlines or community records might unlock something in her. The librarian Mrs. Carter, a soft-spoken widow with too many cats, recognized Jack immediately and offered them the microfiche station in the back, away from the few high schoolers doing homework. Ellie sat in front of the glowing screen while Jack loaded the reel. "I found the 2004 archive," he said quietly. "Seattle Times, October." Ellie's fingers hovered over the dial. She swallowed and began scrolling. Her breath caught on the first headline. "Tragedy at Halberg Estate. Fire claims lives of billionaire philanthropists." Her heart thudded painfully as she read on. No survivors reported. Only child presumed dead. She felt it again, the heat, the stinging smoke in her throat, the distant echo of a scream. Ellie leaned back, her head pounding. "That's not right," she whispered. Jack looked at her. "What do you mean I wasn't in the house?" Her voice was thin, a tremor wrapped in words. "I was already gone." Jack leaned forward. "Taken, I think. I think I was grabbed before it happened. That fire, it wasn't an accident. It was to cover something up. Maybe to erase me." Jack exhaled slowly. "That's a hell of a theory." "It's not a theory," she said, eyes locked on the screen. "It's a feeling. And I don't know how I know, but I do." Later that night, back at the house, Jack made dinner while Gracie colored at the table. Ellie sat with them, but her thoughts were far away. On the news, a newscaster spoke about an upcoming court case, an ongoing battle over ownership of the Halberg Foundation's remaining assets. Most had been managed by a trustee for the past 2 decades, Richard Halberg, the younger brother of Emily's father. He'd stepped in as executor after the fire. Ellie's head jerked toward the TV. "Who is that?" she asked. Jack muted it. "That's Richard Halberg, your uncle, the one who took over everything after the fire." Ellie stared at the screen. The man was older now, salt and pepper hair, neatly combed suit, tailored eyes like polished glass. But something in her bones chilled. "I know that voice," she said, barely audible. "Not from the TV, from before." Jack stood. "Are you sure?" Ellie nodded slowly. "He used to speak softly. Too softly. Like everything he said had a secret under it." Jack sat back down. "You think he had something to do with your disappearance?" "I don't think," she said. "I feel it." There was a long silence. Gracie, oblivious, held up a drawing. "Look, Miss Ellie, it's us. You, me, and Daddy in the snow." Ellie looked at the picture, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun, and something inside her cracked. Her whole life she'd longed for a family. Not just a memory of one, not just old photographs and stories printed in newspapers, but one she could feel, one she could come home to. Jack saw it in her eyes. He reached out, covering her hand with his. "You're not alone anymore." That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She crept out of bed and tiptoed into Jack's study, really just a corner of the living room, with a desk and stacks of repair invoices. She opened his laptop and began to type Richard Halberg legal history. She found more than she expected. In 2003, Richard had been investigated for wire fraud, but charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. After the fire, he became sole trustee of the Halberg estate, worth $112 million at the time. Multiple charities under the Halberg Foundation had shuttered mysteriously. And one article tucked behind a paywall, but Jack had a subscription, mentioned a whistleblower, a former accountant who disappeared in 2005 after filing a sealed complaint. Her fingers trembled as she clicked through. Everything inside her screamed the same word: cover-up. Footsteps creaked behind her. She turned, startled, but it was Jack. He rubbed his eyes. "Couldn't sleep either." "I think I know why no one found me," she said, voice tight. "Because someone made sure they wouldn't." Jack leaned over her shoulder, scanning the articles. "That's a lot of buried skeletons. I think I was one of them." The next morning, Ellie sat with Gracie at the breakfast table while Jack stepped outside to take a call from Ray Turlow, the retired detective. When he came back in, his face had changed. "You need to hear this," Jack said. Ellie looked up, heart pounding. Ray confirmed Richard Halberg had personal access to the estate's private staff schedules. There was a driver who quit 2 days before the fire, never interviewed, and a maid who was suddenly deported after testifying. Nothing ever added up. Everyone assumed you were killed in the fire. Ellie stood slowly. "But I wasn't." "No," Jack said. And if Richard's behind it, and you come forward now, you're a threat to everything he built. Ellie looked toward the window where snow still clung to the trees like ash. Then it's time to stop hiding. Jack's voice was low. That means going public. DNA results, police, lawyers, the press. I don't care. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. I'm done being someone's secret. She turned to Gracie, who smiled at her without a trace of doubt. I'm not afraid anymore, Ellie said, because I finally have something worth fighting for. Jack's breath caught in his chest. So did his heart. Ellie stood by the mailbox, the sealed envelope in her hands. The DNA test had been sent 5 days ago, and every morning since she'd walked outside, half hoping and half dreading to see a plain white package bearing results that could either confirm her worst fears or validate the ache she'd carried all her life. Today wasn't the day. She turned back toward the house, clutching her sweater tighter around her. In the yard, Gracie was building another snowman, this one, with a pink scarf and 3 mismatched buttons. Jack knelt beside her, laughing at something she'd said, brushing snow off her hat, like a father who never grew tired of doing it. That image, their ease together, the warmth even in the cold, was beginning to feel like a life Ellie didn't know she could have. But it was also what made the memories harder. That night, as the wind curled against the windows and the fire popped in the hearth, Ellie sat across from Jack, her hands resting on the locket. I think I'm ready, she said quietly, to go deeper. Jack looked up from the papers he was sorting. You mean with the memories I want to try hypnotherapy? His brows furrowed. Are you sure? She nodded. I don't think I can wait for my brain to give them back naturally. I need to know. I have to. He studied her for a long moment, then reached for his phone. I know someone. She's a licensed trauma specialist. Used to work with foster kids. The next day they drove into the city. The therapist's name was Dr. Lillian Howe, a silver-haired woman with eyes like warm stone. She greeted Ellie with gentle professionalism and offered Jack a seat in the adjoining room, just out of view but close enough for comfort. Ellie lay back on the recliner. The lights were dimmed. A soft metronome ticked from a speaker. Ellie, Dr. Howe said, her voice low and smooth. I want you to focus on the sound. Let it guide you. Let it carry you gently backward, like a river to its source. Ellie's breathing slowed. Her hands loosened. Where are you now? The doctor asked. There was a long pause. A room, Ellie whispered. Dark. Cold floor. There's a smell. Bleach and metal. I'm alone. Do you know how old you are? Maybe 6. I have a stuffed rabbit. I call him Henry. Dr. Howe's voice softened. Good. You're doing very well. Is anyone else there? Ellie shifted. Her body tensed slightly. Footsteps. A man. Always the same time. He brings food, but he never talks. Can you see his face? No, but I hear keys. He always locks the door. Jack, listening through the monitor, clenched his fists. Ellie's voice cracked. I asked for my mommy. He says she's gone. Says she left me because I was bad. Dr. Howe's expression remained calm, but her pen slowed. Let's move forward, she said, to a moment you remember clearly. Ellie's hands twitched on her lap. Her voice rose. I'm in a different place. A house. With a woman. She says her name is Janet. She teaches me how to cook rice. Says my name is Lisa now. That Emily is gone. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Her lips trembled. I wanted to believe her. I stopped asking about the fire. I stopped saying my name. I just wanted to be loved again. Jack looked down, his throat tightening. Ellie whispered, she wasn't cruel, just scared. She said we'd be punished if anyone found out. Do you remember when that changed? Dr. Howe asked. A long silence. Then yes. One day a man came to the house. Janet was crying. He handed her a thick envelope and said, time's up. That night she packed my things, dropped me off in a town, said someone else would take care of me. I never saw her again. Dr. Howe reached out and gently placed a hand over Ellie's. You did nothing wrong, she said. You were just a little girl trying to survive. Ellie's breath hitched, and in that moment a dam broke, not of information, but of emotion. All the years of not being chosen, of wondering why, of hearing silence when she called out into the dark. When the session ended, Ellie sat in Jack's truck, staring at the dashboard, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She gave me away like a pet, she said. And the man, he kept showing up in different forms. I think she paused, swallowing. I think he worked for my uncle. Jack didn't say anything, just reached over and took her hand. You came back, he said. That's what matters now. That night, Ellie didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table staring at a candle flickering on the counter. She pulled the locket off her neck and opened it again. The photo was worn now, nearly faded. She whispered, I didn't forget you. You were just too far away. Suddenly, a noise startled her. The mail slot creaked, a thump on the floor. She walked over and found it a small padded envelope with the DNA lab's seal on it. Her breath caught. She tore it open with trembling hands. Inside a single sheet. Match confirmed, 99.98% probability. Subject DNA is maternally linked to Halberg, Margaret L., deceased. Ellie dropped into the nearest chair, paper still in hand. Jack, awoken by the sound, walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. He saw her face, saw the envelope, and understood instantly. It's true, Ellie said, voice barely a whisper. I'm her. I'm Emily Halberg. Jack knelt beside her. He didn't ask what came next. He just wrapped his arms around her, holding her, as if she were both fragile and unbreakable all at once. And in that quiet embrace, Emily finally let herself cry, not because she was afraid, but because she wasn't lost anymore. The morning after the DNA results arrived, the house felt different, charged with an invisible electricity like the air before a summer storm. Emily, no longer just Ellie, sat at the edge of Jack's porch swing, her eyes fixed on the tree line. The letter confirming her identity lay folded in her coat pocket, worn at the creases, already as if she'd read it a dozen times just to believe it was real. She had a name now, but with it came something else, danger. Jack stood behind the screen door, watching her through the mesh coffee cooling in his hand. He knew better than to interrupt. What she was doing now wasn't mourning. It was remembering, piecing together a self that had been shattered and scattered for 20 years. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. He's going to come for me. Jack stepped outside. You're not alone this time. Emily turned to look at him. You don't understand. He's not just rich. He's calculated. Every move he makes is 5 steps ahead of everyone else. Jack sat beside her. Then we stay 5 steps ahead, too. Emily gave him a wry look. You fix roofs, Jack. This is way bigger than that. He chuckled softly. Maybe. But I also fix what's broken. And someone broke you. So yeah, it is my job. The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Do you even know how absurd that sounds? Jack met her gaze without flinching. Maybe, but you've been running a long time. This is where the running ends. That afternoon, Jack took Gracie to a birthday party while Emily stayed behind. She needed the house quiet, needed space to face what came next. She pulled out the old leather-bound journal Jack had found in the attic, a forgotten relic from the previous owner, and began to write. She didn't start with her name or the fire or the years she lost. She started with the first thing she remembered clearly, the smell of cinnamon in Gracie's hair. It grounded her. Because for all the horror that had resurfaced, it was this place, this quiet, creaky old house filled with mismatched furniture and laughter that had given her the strength to go looking into the dark. Halfway through writing, the doorbell rang. Her body stiffened. Slowly, she rose and opened the door. A man in a navy parka stood on the porch, clipboard in hand. Miss Monroe. Her stomach turned. Who's asking? Courier from Holbrook Legal. I have a delivery for a Jane Doe matching your DNA file. Emily froze. The man held out an envelope. Signed and confirmed. Legal response pending. She took the envelope with a shaking hand. As the courier left, she closed the door and stared at the bold black return address, Halberg Estate Legal Division. Inside was a single sheet of heavy parchment. We are requesting the individual formerly known as Emily Halberg refrain from further contact with the press or the Halberg Trust until proof of identity is confirmed through formal court proceedings. Legal representation will be provided if requested. Until then, please consider this a cease and desist notice regarding the use of the Halberg name. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Beneath the polite legalese was a message so clear it pulsed off the page. Stay quiet. Stay gone. Emily's jaw clenched. She walked into the kitchen, grabbed the fireplace lighter, and flicked it alive. Then she burned the letter over the sink. When Jack returned that evening, he found her standing outside with Gracie watching the stars come out. She had a stillness to her that wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. He sensed the shift before she even spoke. "They know," she said. "Someone sent a courier. They're trying to scare me into silence." Jack looked at her carefully. "Are they succeeding?" She looked back at him, eyes blazing. "Not even close. They called Ray Turlow that night." The old detective's voice came through sharp and crackling on speaker. "I've been expecting this," he said. "Word's getting around. You need to be careful now. No unlisted visitors. No phone calls from numbers you don't know. And if you haven't already, it's time to make it public." "You mean the press?" Jack asked. "I mean the truth," Ray replied. "Someone's built their empire on a lie, and now they're afraid the one person who can unravel it has finally woken up." Emily swallowed hard. "What happens if I go public?" "You get a target on your back," Ray said bluntly. "But you also make it harder for them to erase you again. You shine a light they can't turn off." Jack looked at her. "Your call." Emily didn't hesitate. "Do it." The video went live the next morning. Just 5 minutes. No makeup, no lawyers. Just Emily sitting on Jack's worn leather couch, locket in hand. "My name is Emily Hallberg. 20 years ago, the world believed I died in a fire. But I'm here. I survived. And I remember now, not everything, but enough. Enough to know I was taken. Enough to know my parents didn't die by accident. Enough to say I am not a ghost. I am not a rumor. I am the truth they tried to bury." By noon, the clip had over 100,000 views. News outlets were calling. Podcasts were dissecting it. And for the first time in 2 decades, the name Emily Hallberg was on everyone's lips again. Not as a tragedy, but as a reckoning. That night, as the wind picked up again and the house settled into its familiar creaks, Jack found Emily in the kitchen, staring out at the woods. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "More than okay." He stepped closer. "You know this isn't over." "I know." She turned to him. "But it's the first time I feel like I'm finally walking towards something instead of away." He smiled, a slow, quiet thing. "I liked Ellie, but I think I'm falling for Emily." Her breath caught. The walls she'd spent years building didn't shatter. They opened. Quietly. Like a door long locked, finally unlatched. And in that moment, she knew this wasn't just about reclaiming her name. It was about choosing her future. And this time, she wasn't letting anyone take it away. The sun rose behind thick clouds the morning after the video went live, casting a grayish hue over Pine Hollow. But Emily didn't feel gray. She felt alive. For the first time in 20 years, she had told the world her name, and the world had answered. Her phone was still buzzing from the flood of messages, journalists, strangers, old friends of the Hallbergs who had never given up hope. There were people who remembered the girl in the photo and were now meeting the woman in the video. But not everyone was celebrating. Emily sat at the kitchen table with Jack and Gracie, a bowl of oatmeal in front of her untouched. Jack had made it without asking, and Gracie had decorated the table with a handmade sign that read, "Welcome back, Emily," in glitter pen. The warmth of it all was enough to make her throat tighten. She reached for Jack's hand. "I know I should feel overwhelmed, but I feel clear, like something in me clicked into place." Jack nodded. "You were never lost. You were stolen. Big difference." Before Emily could respond, the front door rattled. 3 hard knocks. Jack stood immediately, instinct sharp. Emily's body stiffened. He opened the door just a crack enough to see the man standing on the porch. Mid-40s, khaki windbreaker, wire-rimmed glasses, government badge displayed clearly. "Mr. Monroe, I'm Agent Kyle Brenner. FBI." Emily's heart dropped. Jack opened the door wider. "What's this about?" The agent offered a calm, clipped smile. "We saw the video. Ms. Hallberg's story is now under federal review. We're here to protect her. And to listen." Emily stepped forward. "And if I don't want protection," Brenner's expression didn't change, "that would be inadvisable. Your family's estate is at the center of a multi-million-dollar fraud case. Someone's been moving money using dormant trusts under your name. Now that you've resurfaced, it's all coming undone." Jack folded his arms. "You think she's in danger? We know she is." Brenner handed over a thin file. Inside were surveillance photos taken just yesterday. Jack's breath caught. "That's our house, our mailbox." Emily stared in horror at a blurry photo of herself walking Gracie to the end of the driveway. "There's more," Brenner said. We intercepted chatter that someone hired a private security firm off the books. Out of state, paid in cash. Their target is listed as Emily Halberg. Alive. Jack turned to her. We're leaving. Emily blinked. What he was already moving. We pack. You and Gracie. We go somewhere no one can find us until this blows over. No, she said, steady now. I'm not running again. Jack stopped. Emily stepped toward him. I ran for 20 years, Jack. I disappeared without a trace. And that's exactly what they wanted. But I'm not giving them what they want anymore. He searched her face. So what do we do? She looked to Agent Brenner. What's the safest way for me to stay visible? Brenner nodded, clearly impressed. We place you under protective surveillance. We coordinate with a federal prosecutor. You prepare to testify. The more public you stay, the harder it is for anyone to make you disappear again. Jack didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. Then we start now, Emily said. I'm done hiding. The next 48 hours blurred into a storm of logistics. Gracie stayed with Jack's sister in a neighboring town kept far away from the noise. Emily gave 2 more interviews, this time on national television. She didn't sensationalize, she didn't cry. She told the truth about the room, the lies, the man in the shadows who told her to forget her name. She ended each interview the same way I remember now. And I am not afraid. By the 3rd day, the internet had exploded with support. When Emily Halberg was trending nationwide, survivors of similar trauma shared their stories. An old family friend of her mother's came forward offering testimony about Richard Halberg's obsession with power. But then the phone call came. Jack picked it up, but it was for her. Ms. Halberg said, a cool voice. My name is Raymond Carlyle. I represent your Uncle Richard. Emily went silent. We'd like to extend an offer privately, discreetly, a financial settlement in exchange for cooperation. Her knuckles whitened around the receiver. Cooperation, she asked. Silence, the man clarified unapologetically. A clean resolution. No press. No court. Your name removed from the estate, but a generous payout for your inconvenience. Emily didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream. She whispered, tell Richard this isn't about money. It's about my mother, my father, and the little girl I was who spent too long in a room with no windows. Then she hung up. Jack stood in the doorway, eyes filled with something between rage and awe. I've never seen you like that, he said. Emily turned to him. I've never been me like this. He crossed the room and took her face gently in his hands. You are the bravest woman I've ever known, he said. She smiled through the tears that finally came. That's funny. I was just thinking the same thing about you. That night they sat by the fire. No reporters, no agents, just them. Emily leaned into Jack's shoulder. I used to wonder if I'd ever feel whole, she said. But it's not about recovering everything that was lost. It's about choosing what matters now. Jack kissed her hair. So what do you choose? She looked at him, then toward the quiet hallway where Gracie's crayon drawings still hung crookedly on the walls. I choose this, she said. Not the name, not the money. This. And for the first time she felt it not just in theory, but in her bones. She wasn't running anymore. She was home. The morning news lit up with images of Emily's face, not as the missing girl anymore, not even as the heir to a fortune, but as a survivor. A woman standing on the front steps of a courthouse, eyes steady, voice unwavering as she gave a statement to the press. I am Emily Halberg. And I'm here not just for myself, but for the truth my parents died trying to protect. The camera flashbulbs exploded around her, but Emily didn't flinch. Jack stood nearby, his hand, a quiet anchor at the small of her back. Federal agents formed a perimeter, but none of them stepped between her and the spotlight. She wasn't hiding anymore. Inside the courthouse, a hearing had been scheduled to begin preliminary estate proceedings based on her reappearance. A judge would determine whether to initiate a full investigation into Richard Halberg's management of the Halberg Foundation and whether Emily had a rightful legal claim. The courtroom was cool, full of polished wood and silence, and then Richard walked in. Emily hadn't seen him in over 20 years, but her body knew before her mind caught up. Her spine stiffened, her skin prickled. He looked older, of course, grayer, thicker around the middle. His once charming face hardened into something smooth and unreadable. But his eyes, and they were exactly the same. cold, controlled, calculating. He didn't look surprised to see her. He looked annoyed. The judge entered. The attorneys introduced themselves. The legal language flowed dry and clinical. But when Emily took the stand, the oxygen shifted. Ms. Halberg, the judge began, we understand this is an informal hearing, but the gravity of your claims warrants clarity. Do you swear to tell the truth? I do, she said, her voice steady. What do you remember from the night of the fire? Emily inhaled. I remember being taken from my bedroom. I remember being told to be quiet, that it was a game. I remember a car in a basement. I remember not knowing who to trust. And then, years of silence. Years of being told I didn't exist. She paused, eyes flicking to Richard. Until I finally believed it. The judge nodded. And now I know who I am, she said. And I know that someone profited from my disappearance. Someone who erased a child and called it an accident. Richard's lawyer stood. Objection, speculation, but Richard himself stood slowly. May I speak, Your Honor? The judge looked surprised but nodded, briefly. Richard turned to the courtroom, his voice as smooth as velvet. Let me begin by saying I am relieved Emily is alive. Her reappearance is both a miracle and a tragedy. But let us not confuse trauma with truth. Memory is malleable, emotional, not always factual. Emily felt her breath catch. Richard smiled. I lost my brother and sister-in-law in that fire. I took on the burden of salvaging what remained, of protecting their legacy. If I made mistakes, I assure you they were born of grief, not greed. There was silence. Then the judge spoke. Thank you. We will consider both statements in our deliberations. Outside the courthouse, the press surged again. Microphones. Questions. But Emily didn't stop to answer. She just walked straight through the crowd with Jack at her side. At home that evening, the world still spinning outside, Emily sat in the quiet of the living room. Gracie curled asleep beside her. The child had insisted on staying up until Emily got home, and now her small body breathed softly against Emily's side, her hand still tucked in Emily's palm. Jack brought her tea. You were incredible today, he said. I don't feel incredible, Emily admitted. I feel like I was standing at the edge of a cliff screaming into wind. Jack sat beside her. But someone heard you? Emily looked down at Gracie's peaceful face. I used to dream of a life like this. Just a couch, a fire, people who care. You deserve it, Jack said quietly. She turned to him, her eyes full. You gave me a reason to fight. You and Gracie. He didn't speak, but reached up and gently brushed a lock of hair from her face. There was a knock at the door. Jack tensed immediately. Emily stood motioning for him to stay. She opened the door slowly. It was Agent Brenner. He looked unusually grave. We need to talk, he said. Emily stepped aside to let him in. There was a break-in, Brenner said, at a law office in Seattle. A sealed affidavit originally filed in 2005 has been leaked. It's a sworn statement from a woman named Janet Avery. Emily's breath stopped. She was a housekeeper hired under false identity. She raised a child for nearly a year before abandoning her. She left this affidavit in case she ever disappeared. Jack spoke first. Does it mention Richard Brenner? Nodded. Explicitly. She claimed he paid her off. Said he told her, quote, you were never hired to raise her. You were hired to make sure she was forgotten. Emily covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. The affidavit is real, Brenner continued. We're moving forward with a criminal investigation. Richard's attorneys know it's coming. He won't go down easy, but he's officially no longer the one holding the cards. Emily looked at Jack. It's happening. He stepped forward and took her hand. You started it. You lit the match. No, she whispered, looking down at Gracie still sleeping peacefully. She did. The moment she looked at me like I mattered, I remembered how it felt to matter. That night, Emily stood outside under the stars wrapped in a blanket. The cold stung her cheeks, but she welcomed it. It meant she could feel. She tilted her face upward. The sky was wide, free, silent, and she wasn't afraid of the silence anymore, because she had a voice now, and she wasn't done using it. The courtroom was colder than Emily remembered. Not physically, though the air conditioning hummed steadily overhead, but emotionally. The walls were high and sterile, the light too white, too clean. It reminded her of the places she'd been taken to as a child, quiet places where adults spoke softly but meant harm. Only this time, she wasn't the one being silenced. She was here to speak. The trial wasn't for her identity that had already been confirmed and publicly recognized. It was for something bigger: the crimes committed in her absence. The embezzlement, the cover-up, the years her uncle Richard Hallberg had operated under the assumption she was dead and therefore couldn't tell the truth. Today she would. Jack sat in the front row beside Gracie, who clutched a stuffed rabbit with pink ears, an accidental but powerful echo of the toy Emily once remembered loving before everything fell apart. She was called to the witness stand just after noon. As she crossed the courtroom, she felt a momentary surge of nausea. But then her eyes met Jack's steady, strong quiet, and she walked forward. The oath felt sacred this time. And then the questioning began. The prosecutor, a tall, no-nonsense woman named Amanda Ruiz, led gently at first. "Ms. Hallberg, could you tell us what you remember from the night your parents died?" Emily nodded, voice calm. "I remember being woken up by a man I didn't recognize. He told me there was an emergency and I had to come with him. I was 5 and I was scared. I didn't question him. He said my parents would meet me at the safe house." A pause. "They never did." Ruiz nodded. "What happened after that? I was taken to a basement. No windows, just a mattress and 4 walls. I didn't know where I was. I cried for days. Eventually someone else came. A woman. She told me my name was Lisa now, that Emily had gone away." There was a hushed murmur in the courtroom. Emily continued, voice steady but thickening. "I wasn't allowed outside. She made me memorize a story, my new story. Every time I asked about my parents, she got upset, so I stopped asking." Ruiz walked closer. "Did she ever tell you who had arranged for her to keep you?" Emily hesitated. She didn't at first, but one night she answered a call. "I wasn't supposed to hear it. She said, 'Yes, Mr. Hallberg, she's still with me.' That's when I knew." Ruiz let the silence settle. "Do you see Mr. Hallberg in the courtroom today?" Emily turned her gaze to the defense table. Richard was there, stiff in a navy suit, eyes like carved stone. He didn't look away. "Yes," Emily said clearly. "That's him." The judge called for a recess. Back in the hallway, Emily leaned against the marble column and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Jack approached quietly. "You were incredible. I thought I'd be more scared," she said, voice soft. "You've already lived through worse." Gracie ran to her and wrapped her arms around Emily's waist. "You looked like a superhero." Emily knelt and pulled her close. "So do you, you know. You saved me, Gracie. You and your dad." Gracie tilted her head. "Will that man go to jail now?" Emily looked up at Jack, then back at Gracie. "That's up to the court, but the truth is out now, and sometimes the truth is the best kind of justice." When the court resumed, the defense made its move. Richard's lawyer stood and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, memory is not fact. Emotion is not evidence. Ms. Hallberg's story is powerful, but it is just that, a story. There is no direct proof tying my client to the fire. No receipts, no eyewitnesses, no confession." Then Richard himself stood. He turned to face the judge, not the jury. "I loved my niece," he said. "I was devastated by her loss. I did my best to manage what was left of our family's legacy. If mistakes were made in handling the estate, I assure you they were administrative, not malicious. And if she was taken by someone, I had nothing to do with it." He sat, cold, controlled, unflinching. But Emily noticed something in the courtroom silence. No one believed him. Not anymore. Hours later, after both sides rested, the judge called for a short recess before giving instructions to the jury. Emily stepped outside, needing air. Jack followed her into the courtyard. The sky was a pale gray, like it hadn't decided what to feel yet. Emily paced her boots, crunching softly on gravel. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked, voice low. Jack shrugged. "Then we do what we always do, which is keep living anyway. Together." Emily looked up at him. His words hit with the kind of gentle finality that made her chest ache. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," he said, "but neither is surviving. And you did that too." The verdict didn't come that day. It came the next morning. Emily arrived early, wearing her mother's pendant for the first time in public. Her hands shook as the bailiff read the decision. Guilty. On all major counts, fraud, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to conceal a missing person. The jury had believed her. The evidence had been enough. Richard didn't flinch. But as he was led away in handcuffs, he turned to Emily and said almost inaudibly, "You should have stayed gone." Emily met his gaze unwavering. "You should have never taken me." And just like that, the man who'd stolen 2 decades of her life was escorted out of the room. That evening, Jack lit a fire back at the house. Gracie roasted marshmallows. Emily stood at the window watching snow begin to fall again, soft, slow, clean. "You're quiet," Jack said, handing her a mug of cider. "I don't know what to do now," she whispered. He smiled. "That's the best part. You get to choose." She turned to him, tears glistening. "I choose this," she said. "Not the courtroom, not the name. This." Jack leaned in and kissed her slow and certain. And for the first time in 20 years, Emily wasn't searching anymore. She had found her way home. Snow-blanketed Pine Hollow, with a kind of reverent hush, the kind that made every footstep feel sacred, every breath more visible. Emily stood at the edge of Jack's front porch in her wool coat, hands tucked in her pockets, watching the pale sky brighten behind the pines. It had been 3 days since the verdict, 3 days since the world turned its gaze from the courtroom to her front door. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a headline. She felt like a person again, a whole one. Inside the house was waking slowly. Jack shuffled in the kitchen, humming off key as he prepared breakfast. Gracie was still asleep, wrapped in the tangled comfort of stuffed animals and dreams. Emily stepped inside and closed the door gently behind her. Jack looked up from the stove, spatula in hand. "I was wondering if you'd gone for a walk." "I almost did," she said, unbuttoning her coat, "but something told me not to leave this view just yet." He smiled, "Still getting used to calling this home." She nodded. "Every hour feels like a question, but every answer points here." Jack handed her a cup of coffee, fingers brushing briefly intentionally against hers. "You're not on borrowed time anymore, Em. You can build something new. You've earned that." She wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep in. "You know, all those years I imagined my real life starting once I found my name again. But now I realize this is my real life. The name just came with it." He leaned against the counter. "So what happens next?" Emily looked out the window, thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that. A lot." Later that morning, she drove back to the city alone. Jack had offered to come, but she needed this visit to be hers alone, one more piece of closure in a mosaic she'd been assembling since the storm. She parked across the street from a weathered brick building, now half converted into trendy offices and half forgotten by time. The old Hallberg Foundation headquarters. Her parents had built it with the intent of creating medical grants for underserved children, quiet, powerful, good in the world. But Richard had turned it into a facade, a shield, a laundering scheme. Emily stood in front of the building for a long moment before stepping inside. The woman at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," Emily said. "My name is Emily Hallberg." The receptionist's eyes widened. "The Emily Hallberg." Emily nodded. "I'd like to speak with whoever's managing the transition of the foundation." After a moment's stunned silence, the woman stood and disappeared behind a set of frosted doors. Emily's heart pounded not with fear, but with certainty. This was the part of the story where she took something broken and gave it purpose again. She was ushered into a boardroom that still smelled faintly of cedar and stale coffee. An older woman in a slate-gray suit greeted her with kind, assessing eyes. "Ms. Hallberg, we didn't expect to see you so soon." Emily sat calm and direct. "I want to take back the foundation. Not for the money, for the mission it was built on." The woman nodded slowly. "That will require a petition and a new board structure." "I'm not here to play figurehead," Emily said. "I'm here to build, to make it what it was meant to be, and I want it named after my mother." The woman smiled, the first genuine expression of the meeting. "Then let's begin." That night, Emily returned home to the smell of tomato soup and the sound of laughter. Gracie was sitting on the floor feeding marshmallows to a stuffed elephant. Jack was stirring the pot on the stove. When Emily walked in, Jack turned, eyes lighting up in that quiet, unmistakable way she had grown to love. "How was it?" he asked. "Better than I thought," she said, pulling off her coat. "I think we just began something real today." He set down the ladle. You did more than that, Em. You came full circle. She moved to him, wrapped her arms around his waist. You're part of that circle. Jack kissed her forehead. So, what do you say we make it official? Emily looked up. Official? He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small hand-carved wooden box. Her breath caught. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant. No diamonds. Just polished silver with a single engraving inside. You are not forgotten. Tears sprang instantly to her eyes. I didn't know if I'd ever find you, Jack said, voice rough now. But when I did, I realized I'd been waiting my whole life to meet the woman who would make my home feel whole. Emily laughed through the tears, one hand over her mouth. He knelt, no audience but the fire. No soundtrack but Gracie's soft giggle in the corner, and said, Emily Hallberg, will you marry me? She dropped to her knees with him, took his face in her hands, and said through a smile that trembled with everything she'd carried and everything she'd let go. Yes. They celebrated with soup and dancing in the living room, Gracie twirling around with a tea towel like it was a veil. Emily laughed until she cried again, this time from joy. Outside, the snow fell steady and soft. Inside, the warmth glowed. And in the quiet hours of that night, as she lay in bed beside the man who had become her anchor and the child who had become her light, Emily Hallberg finally stopped waiting for the past to return, because the future had come home. Spring came quietly to Pine Hollow. It tiptoed in through the melting snowbanks and crocus blossoms, peeking from thawed earth. The air softened. Windows cracked open. Life, long buried beneath winter's hush, dared to rise again. Emily sat on the porch swing of what was now her home, truly hers, not because of a deed or a nameplate, but because of the laughter that echoed down the hallway each morning, the scent of toast and honey in the kitchen, the feeling that no one here had to pretend to be anyone but themselves. Jack stepped out beside her with 2 mugs of coffee, one for her, one for him. He was wearing a flannel shirt she secretly hoped he'd never throw away. She took the mug, their fingers brushing in that way they always did, as if even now they hadn't quite gotten used to the miracle of touching someone and being touched back. You ready? He asked, voice low and easy. Emily smiled. I think I've been ready for a long time. They looked out at the meadow where neighbors were beginning to gather folding chairs, lemonade pitchers, wildflowers tucked into mason jars. A simple ceremony, no chandeliers, no orchestra. Just them, their people, and a love that had been weathered and forged by something deeper than time truth. Inside, Gracie squealed with delight as she ran out in her flower girl dress, white sneakers, a crown of daisies in her hair, a handmade sign in her hand that read, Here comes the bride. Finally, Jack laughed. That child's sense of drama is uncanny. She gets it from her dad. Emily teased, nudging his elbow. He kissed her temple. She gets her heart from you. Emily paused, the moment swelling in her chest. Do you remember the night you found me? She asked quietly. Every detail, he replied. Snow. Silence. And a woman who looked like she didn't know whether to fight or vanish. I was both, she said. And you didn't try to fix me. You just sat beside me. Jack looked at her, eyes full. You didn't need fixing. You needed someone to believe you were already whole. They sat in that silence a while, letting the warmth between them settle deep. Down at the hill, someone started strumming a guitar, one of the neighbors, a soft folk melody drifting on the breeze. Emily rose, smoothing her dress, not white, but a soft shade of blue that Gracie said matched her eyes when she smiled. Jack stood with her, reaching for her hand. You nervous? He asked. Emily laughed. I've testified in federal court and confronted the man who erased my identity. I think I can handle saying I do. He grinned. Fair enough. They walked down the path together, hand in hand, as petals drifted on the wind and guests stood to greet them. The ceremony was short, heartfelt. Gracie read a poem she'd written herself involving stars and mountains and how love can be like glue but not the sticky kind. When it came time for vows, Jack went first. I've built houses, he said, voice catching. I've repaired broken beams, patched leaking roofs. But nothing has taught me more about what it means to make a home than loving you. You showed up in a storm and brought something I didn't know I'd lost: faith. Faith in kindness, in grace, in second chances. Emily's eyes shimmered. Then it was her turn. For so long, I thought love was something fragile, she said. Something that could be taken like a name, a memory, a life. But then you and Gracie showed me it isn't. Love, when it's real, doesn't disappear. It waits. It stays. And when I stopped running, you were there. So today I choose love. I choose you. Again, and again, and again. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. And when they kissed, it wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning they'd been walking toward all along. Later that evening, after the last lanterns had dimmed and Gracie had fallen asleep on the couch with cake on her chin, Emily walked out to the backyard alone. She stood beneath the stars, the same sky that had once felt so distant, and whispered a quiet thank you to her parents wherever they were, and to the little girl she used to be, the one who had survived even when she didn't understand how. Jack joined her, sliding an arm around her shoulders. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I used to believe I was the girl from nowhere," she said softly. "Now I know. I'm the girl who came home." He pulled her close. And they stood there in the stillness of their shared life as spring carried on around them, gentle, warm, and full of promise. She had been forgotten, hidden, and nearly erased, but in the end, she was found chosen and loved. Not because of the name she reclaimed, but because of the heart she never lost. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another journey of hope, love, and resilience. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and stay inspired.